Welcome to today's video. Behind me is a section of the Great Isaiah Scroll found in Qumran. It's not the best written scroll, but it is interesting. Now the part that I'm going to be talking about is Isaiah 53:9, this bit right here. And the most important word to know is the very first one. So I need to explain a bit about verbs first. And to do that, let's look for a minute at Genesis 1:1. Here is one of the most famous lines in the world. As you can see, the first three Hebrew words, reading them from right to left, are white, yellow, and turquoise, while the first three English words, reading them from left to right, are white, turquoise, and yellow. It's an interesting difference. That's because in Hebrew, verbs do not have to follow the noun and may not even be next to one another. Many verbs are in the same family as this one, where a special word, which I colored orange, has no translation, but simply points to the nouns that will be affected by the verb. And since Elohim does not have this indicator, we know that the noun Elohim is causing the verb he created to act upon the two nouns preceded by the orange indicator, the heavens and the earth. And that is how we end up reading this sentence as what is commonly translated as, in the beginning, Elohim, he created the heavens and the earth. This is important. Verbs and nouns may not be in the usual order for English speakers, and if indicators, such as the orange word, are used, they are not translated, they simply point to the affected nouns. The difference in order and the gap between the words is common within songs and poetry, where the writer wants to force a certain cadence or rhyming. And that brings us back to Isaiah 53:9. Let's look at the King James Version first. And he made his grave with the wicked, and the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was there any deceit in his mouth. In the New Testament story, the main protagonist is executed with a pair of wicked men on either side, and a rich man gave the dead man his grave, burying him. It doesn't say why, only that the rich man was honorable. So the King James Version of the text seems to very closely reflect that story. The protagonist is dead, has been buried, although the ending sentence, because he had done no violence, doesn't do much here. That is, until we look at the Hebrew version of the very same verse. The first word in this verse is a verb. Typically, it is translated as, and he gave. But since the giving is to a thing, I prefer, and he cast, since the recipient is incapable of performing any act of receiving. As with Genesis 1:1, the objects being cast forth are indicated by the same two-letter term, which we see in the words colored in green, the wicked ones, and in pink, the wealthy. The recipient is a masculine noun, the only one without a two-letter indicator, which is the burying place, the recipient. And the burying place has a suffix meaning his. And the grave modifier, with its dead ones, a plurality of dead belonging to the grave. Since Hebrew is gender-based, and since we don't typically call a grave him, I prefer to call the grave it. So, instead of the protagonist being killed along with the bad guys, and then buried in a rich man's tomb, we see that the protagonist was rescued from death, with his tormentors being killed instead. Their bodies cast into a grave, and he was saved, because he had done no violence, as it says. He didn't deserve his fate. As to who all of the he and his are being referred to, sometimes it's not completely clear, for such is the way of songs. The first he, and he cast, is the one doing the saving, although who that is isn't clear. Because he did no violence is certainly the protagonist, but the phrase his grave could refer to Shaul, where his means Yahweh, or it could be the protagonist's grave, meaning the bad guys prepared it, but they ended up being buried in it instead of the protagonist. There are other possibilities, of course. But in any case, using the verb form correctly, we see that Isaiah 53:9 does not match the New Testament story even remotely. In Isaiah, the protagonist doesn't get killed but is saved, and his tormentors are killed instead. So, I hope that you found this video to be of interest. If so, please let others know and click on the like and subscribe buttons. Feel free to comment below. I am Alicia Benabuya, and as always, it's been a pleasure.